Park Ji-won sat in the steel room, his lungs burning with each breath. The air here was different, thinner somehow. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked around at the strange curved walls. Last night, he had been collecting soil samples in the forest for his environmental research. Now he was here, wherever here was. A door slid open with a soft hiss. Two tall beings entered. Their skin was blue and smooth like polished stone. They wore silver uniforms with strange symbols. Ji-won tried to stand but fell back to his knees, coughing. "This human specimen is defective," said the taller one in perfect Korean, though its mouth barely moved. "Respiratory system already failing." "Perfect for our needs, Commander Toll," replied the smaller one. "The weaker the test subject, the higher the bets." Ji-won's eyes widened. They were talking about him like he was an animal. "Where am I? Who are you?" he asked, forcing the words through his tight chest. Commander Toll looked down at him. "You are on the Vorax selection vessel. I am Commander Toll. This is Sub-Commander Kell. You have been chosen for the Crucible tournament." "Tournament? I don't understand," Ji-won said. "It's simple," Kell explained. "We gather specimens from developing worlds. You compete for survival on Crucible. Other species bet on the outcomes." He checked a small device. "Most bets place you dead before the first sunset." Ji-won felt cold fear spreading through his body. "And if I refuse?" Toll made a sound like rocks sliding together. Laughter, perhaps. "Participation is not optional." They guided Ji-won to a wall with a clear section. Beyond it was a large room with many cells. Each held a different creature. Some had many limbs. Others had scales or spikes. All looked stronger than any human. "Look at the Dravak specimen." Kell pointed to a massive creature with red scales. 3 meters tall, armored skin, 4 powerful arms. It will likely last many days. "And the Zoltar," added Toll, indicating a being that seemed made of crystal, "can survive in almost any environment." Ji-won pressed his hand against the clear wall. "Why me? There are stronger humans." "We specifically choose the weakest specimens," Toll said. "It makes the tournament more interesting." Later, Ji-won was taken to a small room with a bed. On it lay a pack with basic supplies. A scanner passed over his body, and a small device was pressed into his wrist. It burned as it embedded itself under his skin. "This will monitor your vital signs and allow us to track you," Kell explained. "It also lets us speak to you on Crucible." "When does this tournament start?" Ji-won asked. "You will be transported to Crucible during sleep." "The tournament begins at sunrise," Toll said. "I suggest you rest. It will be your last comfortable night." After they left, Ji-won examined the supplies. A knife, a container for water, a fire starter, and some unfamiliar items. His scientific mind began working, despite his fear. He studied each item carefully, trying to understand its function. That night, as Ji-won drifted into uneasy sleep, he heard Toll and Kell talking outside his door. "Shall we place our bets, Sub-Commander?" asked Toll. "I give the human until midday," Kell replied. "These oxygen breathers are fragile, and this one is damaged already." "I'll be generous and say he survives until sunset," Toll said, "though I doubt it." When Ji-won woke, he lay on hard ground under a strange purple sky. 2 suns were rising on the horizon. The air was hot and smelled of sulfur. Around him stretched a barren landscape with strange rock formations. In the distance, he could see what looked like a forest of tall, twisted plants. The device in his wrist glowed. "Human specimen," came Toll's voice. "Welcome to Crucible. Your objective is simple. Survive. That is all." Ji-won stood shakily, feeling the thin air burn in his lungs. He picked up the pack beside him and looked around. In the distance, he could see other figures being dropped onto the planet's surface. His scientific training took over. First, find water and shelter, then plan next steps. As he began walking toward the strange forest, he could feel unseen eyes watching him. Somewhere the Vorax were placing their bets on his death. But Park Ji-won had no intention of dying today, or tomorrow. The aliens had made one serious mistake. They had chosen him because he seemed weak. But they didn't understand. Human strength comes in many forms. His mind was already working, analyzing, planning. They thought he wouldn't last a day. He would prove them wrong. The hot sun beat down on Ji-won as he stumbled through the rocky terrain. His lungs burned with each breath. The strange purple sky of Crucible seemed to press down on him. 4 hours had passed since he woke on this alien planet. Already his mouth felt dry and his skin was turning red from the harsh sunlight. The human moved slowly, came Kel's voice from the device in Ji-won's wrist. Perhaps he is already dying. Ji-won ignored the taunt. He kept walking toward the cluster of tall, twisted plants he had spotted earlier. His scientific training told him that plants meant water. Water meant life. Behind him, he heard a terrible scream. Looking back, he saw one of the other competitors, a tall, insect-like creature, being dragged into a crack in the ground by something with many tentacles. The sight made Ji-won move faster despite his tiredness. In the viewing chamber of the Vorax ship, Commander Tull and Sub-Commander Kel watched screens showing all the competitors. The Dravak has already killed 2 others, Kel noted, pointing to the red-scaled creature that was now drinking the blue blood of its victim. Strong and clever. Yes, but watch the human, Tull said, tapping another screen. He moves with purpose. Toward the poison forest? Foolish. Those plants release toxic spores when touched. Tull tilted his head. Perhaps. Or perhaps he knows something. We don't. Ji-won reached the edge of the strange forest and stopped. The plants were twice his height, with thick trunks and branches that twisted toward the sky. Small spore pods hung from the branches, glowing faintly. He picked up a rock and threw it at one of the pods. It burst open with a soft pop, releasing a cloud of glowing dust. Ji-won covered his mouth and nose with his shirt and backed away quickly, watching as the dust settled on the ground. Interesting, he muttered to himself. From his pack, he took out a small strip of cloth and tore off a piece. He tied it around his face as a mask. Then he carefully moved forward, staying downwind of the plants. At the base of the largest plant, he found what he was looking for, a small pool of clear liquid. Using his knife, he cut off a piece of one plant's bark. He dipped it into the liquid and waited. The bark didn't change color or dissolve. He touched the tip of his finger to the liquid, then tasted it carefully. Water, he said with relief. Filtered by the plant roots. He filled his container, then looked for a safe place to rest. He spotted a small cave in a nearby rock formation and made his way there, careful not to disturb any of the spore pods. Inside the cave, he found it was cooler. He took small sips of water and examined the strange items in his pack more carefully. One was a small device that glowed when he touched it. Another looked like a thin sheet of metal that folded into different shapes. The human has found shelter, Kel observed on the ship. But he will need food soon. The betting pool gives him 3 more hours, Tull replied. No one has wagered on him surviving the night. As the day wore on, Ji-won ventured out to explore. Around his cave, he found small creatures hiding under rocks, things like lizards but with 6 legs and glowing eyes. Using his knife and quick hands, he managed to catch one. Back in the cave, he used the fire starter from his pack to make a small fire. He cooked the lizard creature and ate it slowly. It tasted strange but gave him strength. He's eating. Kel said with surprise. How did he know which creatures were safe? He tested the meat with that device from his pack, Tull pointed out. It seems to detect toxins. Clever for such a primitive being, Kel admitted. As the alien suns began to set, casting strange shadows across the landscape, Ji-won prepared for night. He gathered more wood for his fire and blocked the entrance to the cave with rocks, leaving just a small opening. From outside came frightening sounds, howls and screams as Crucible's nocturnal predators emerged. Ji-won shivered but kept his fire going. The smoke helped mask his scent. On the viewing screens, Tull and Kel watched as 3 more competitors died during the night. The Dravak warrior had made a shelter in a tree. The crystal Zoltar had burrowed underground, but several others had not found safety. The human survives his first night, Tall said as the suns rose again. Unexpected. A lucky accident, Kel replied. He will not last another day. Jiwan woke to the sound of heavy breathing outside his cave. Something large was sniffing around the entrance. He held perfectly still, clutching his knife. A massive paw with sharp claws pushed through the small opening, trying to reach him. Jiwan looked around desperately. Then he noticed the spore pods he had collected yesterday. He grabbed one and threw it at the paw. The pod burst, releasing toxic dust. The creature outside howled in pain and retreated. Jiwan waited until he was sure it was gone, then carefully moved the rocks and peered out. The landscape looked different in the morning light. He could see a mountain range in the distance and what looked like a lake. On the ship, the betting pool was in chaos. No one had expected the weak human to survive the night. How is this possible? Kel demanded. His breathing was labored from the beginning. He should have died from exertion alone. Tall studied the human closely on the screen. Perhaps we misjudged. Watch how he uses his environment. He doesn't fight directly. He thinks. Thinking will not save him from the Dravak if they meet. Kel scoffed. Jiwan left his cave and headed toward the lake he had spotted. He moved carefully, staying close to rocks where he could hide if needed. His scientific mind cataloged everything. He saw the plants, the rocks, the small creatures that scattered at his approach. He didn't notice the pair of yellow eyes watching him from a ridge above. The Dravak warrior had found his trail and was following, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. 5 days had passed since the tournament began. The twin suns beat down on Crucible's harsh landscape, but Jiwan no longer felt overwhelmed by the heat or the thin air. His body was adapting. He crouched by the shore of a small lake examining the tracks in the mud. Something large had been here recently. He needed to be careful. The human continues to surprise, Commander Toll said, watching the viewing screen from the Vorik ship above. Half the competitors are dead, yet he thrives. Sub-Commander Kel clicked his teeth in frustration. Pure luck. He has avoided the stronger creatures. Is it luck? Tall wondered. Or strategy? Jiwan had built a small shelter among the rocks near the lake. Inside he had created a notebook using the thin metal sheets from his pack. On them he drew maps of the area and pictures of plants and creatures he had encountered. Some plants, he discovered, had healing properties. Others were deadly poison. He had learned which small animals were safe to eat and which water sources to trust. The viewers are frustrated, Kel reported. They expected blood and combat from this tournament. The human does nothing exciting. He survives, Tull replied. That is the point of the game. The Dravak has killed 4 competitors. The Zoltar 3. The human hides and draws pictures. Tull leaned closer to the screen. What is he doing now? Jiwan was gathering certain plants and mixing their juices in a container. He added water and stirred the mixture, then poured it into small pods he had hollowed out. He placed these around his shelter, carefully hiding them under rocks and leaves. That night, a pack of 6-legged predators approached his camp, drawn by the smell of the food he had stored. But as they stepped on the hidden pods, the containers burst. The liquid inside gave off a strong odor that made the creatures howl and run away. Remarkable, Tall said. He created a repellent, still just avoiding conflict, Kel grumbled. The next morning, Jiwan explored farther from his camp than before. He climbed a tall rock formation to get a better view of the surrounding area. From this height, he could see other competitors in the distance. The massive Dravak warrior was hunting near the forest. The crystal Zoltar glittered in the sunlight as it moved across an open plain. 3 other creatures Jiwan didn't recognize were gathered by a distant water source. Suddenly, Jiwan noticed something strange. Near the base of a mountain far to the east, he saw regular shapes that didn't look natural, square and rectangular forms that suggested buildings. He spotted the ruins, Tall said with interest. Should we block his path? Kel asked. The ancient technology there could be dangerous in his hands, No, Toll decided. Let us see what he does. The betting pool has shifted. Some are now wagering he will survive until the final phase. Over the next 2 days, Jiwan carefully made his way toward the ruins. He traveled mostly at dawn and dusk when the predators were less active. He used the toxic spore pods as protection when needed and created simple traps around his sleeping spots. The Vorax viewers were becoming increasingly interested in the human's progress. His methodical approach was unlike anything they had seen in previous tournaments. The human doesn't rely on strength or speed, one Vorax scientist observed. He uses his mind as a weapon. A primitive mind, Kel insisted. Is it? Toll countered. He has adapted to an alien environment in less than a week. He uses the planet's own resources against its dangers. Jiwan reached the ruins as the suns were setting on the 7th day. The structures were clearly artificial, stone buildings half buried in the ground. Strange symbols covered the walls, similar to those on the Vorax ship. He entered carefully, knife in hand. Inside the largest building, he found what appeared to be control panels and screens, though all were dark and lifeless. An old monitoring station, Toll explained to the viewers. From when we first terraformed Crucible for the tournaments thousands of years ago, Jiwan ran his fingers over the symbols on the walls trying to understand their meaning. Some matched the strange items in his pack. He took out the glowing device and placed it on what looked like a matching indentation in the wall. Nothing happened. He tried another spot. Still nothing. Then he noticed a small panel that seemed to match the shape of the device in his wrist, the tracker the Vorax had implanted. He wouldn't, Kel said. He might, Toll replied with growing excitement. Jiwan hesitated, then pressed his wrist against the panel. Pain shot through his arm as the device activated. The symbols on the walls began to glow and a screen flickered to life. On it appeared images of the entire planet, showing the locations of all remaining competitors. Jiwan studied the map carefully, memorizing the positions of the dangerous, Dravak and the others. He now has access to the same information we do, Toll said. This is unprecedented, Kel admitted. No competitor has ever activated the old systems before. Jiwan found another panel and pressed his wrist against it. A drawer slid open, revealing tools and devices he didn't recognize. He took them carefully, examining each one. Outside, the sky darkened as night fell. Strange howls echoed across the ruins, but Jiwan didn't seem afraid anymore. He sat cross-legged on the floor, using the light from the screens to study the tools he had found. The human advantage, Toll said softly, is not strength or speed, or natural weapons. Then what is it? Kel asked. Curiosity, adaptability, the drive to understand. On the screen, Jiwan began to smile as he figured out how one of the devices worked. It projected a force field around him, small, but enough to keep him safe for the night. The betting pool shifted dramatically. Now many Vorax were wagering that the human would survive to the end of the tournament, and some were even betting he might win. The 10th day of the tournament dawned with a strange purple mist covering the ground. Jiwan moved cautiously through the ruins, testing the devices he had discovered. One projected a small shield of energy. Another could detect movement nearby. A third seemed to translate the alien symbols on the walls. The human has adapted our technology quickly, Commander Toll observed from the viewing chamber. Most species take much longer to understand such tools. Sub-Commander Kel had stopped arguing. Even he could see that this human was different from previous competitors. Using the map he had found, Jiwan planned his next moves carefully. He needed to avoid the Dravak warrior, who had killed more competitors than any other. The crystal Zoltar was also dangerous, absorbing energy from anything it touched. Jiwan packed the most useful devices into his bag and left the ruins. According to the map, there was another structure to the north that might contain more supplies. He headed in that direction, moving through the twisted forest to stay hidden. Halfway there, his movement detector began to flash. Something large was approaching from the east. Jiwan quickly climbed a tree and waited. Through the purple mist came a massive figure, the Dravak warrior. Its red scales gleamed in the morning light. All four of its powerful arms carried weapons made from bone and stone. But Jiwan noticed something strange. The Dravak was limping, and dark fluid leaked from a wound in its side. The Dravak was injured fighting the Zoltar. Tall explained to the viewers. Neither could defeat the other. Jiwan watched silently as the Dravak collapsed near the base of his tree. The creature's breathing was labored. The wound looked infected. Without treatment, the Dravak would die soon. The viewing chamber grew quiet as everyone watched. This was the moment many had been waiting for. Would the human take revenge on the creature that had killed so many others? Jiwan climbed down from the tree and stood a safe distance from the injured Dravak. The creature saw him and tried to rise but fell back with a roar of pain. "Kill it," Kel urged, though the human couldn't hear him. "That's how you win." To everyone's surprise, Jiwan put down his weapon. He held up his hands to show he meant no harm. Then he took out his water container and slowly approached. The Dravak watched him with golden eyes full of suspicion. It growled a warning. Jiwan stopped, then set the water container on the ground and backed away. The Dravak reached out with one long arm and grabbed it, drinking deeply. "What is the human doing?" one viewer asked. "This makes no sense." Jiwan returned to his pack and took out some of the healing plants he had collected. He mixed them with water to create a paste. Then, moving very slowly, he approached the Dravak again. The creature could have killed him with one blow, but it was too weak. It watched as Jiwan pointed to the wound, then held up the paste. "He's offering to help," Tall said in disbelief. "No competitor has ever aided another," Kel added. "It goes against the nature of the tournament." The Dravak seemed to understand. After a moment's hesitation, it moved its arms away from the wound, allowing Jiwan access. Jiwan worked quickly, cleaning the injury and applying the healing paste. The Dravak flinched but did not attack. When Jiwan finished, he wrapped the wound with leaves that would keep it clean. "I am Jiwan," he said, touching his chest. Then he pointed to the Dravak. "You?" The creature made a series of clicks and growls. "Day," it managed to say in a rough voice. "The translation device is working," Toll noted. "The human can communicate with other species now." Over the next 2 days, Jiwan stayed with Day as the Dravak's strength returned. He shared his food and knowledge of safe plants to eat. In return, Day taught him how to use the bone weapons he had crafted. "Why help?" Day asked on the 3rd day. His speech was improving as he learned Jiwan's language. "Together stronger," Jiwan replied simply. "Alone, we die." Day seemed to consider this new idea. In his world, alliance was unknown. It was always kill or be killed. But he could not deny that without the human's help he would have died from his wound. Together, Day agreed finally. In the viewing chamber, chaos erupted. Viewers argued about whether this alliance should be allowed. Some demanded the Vorax intervene. Others found the development fascinating. "The tournament rules do not forbid cooperation," Tall ruled. "This is unprecedented but legitimate." Jiwan showed Day the map of Crucible he had found. Together they planned a route to avoid the Zoltar and find more ruins with useful technology. As they traveled, Jiwan noticed Day watching him carefully. "Why not strong like others?" Day asked, pointing to Jiwan's smaller frame and careful movements. "Different. Strength," Jiwan replied. He tapped his head. "Here." Day didn't understand at first, but as they continued together, he began to see what Jiwan meant. The human's power wasn't in his muscles but in his mind. On the 15th day they encountered another competitor, a floating creature with tentacles that Day called Han. It was injured, trapped beneath fallen rocks after a landslide. Without discussion, both Jiwan and Day moved to help free the creature. Han was suspicious at first but accepted their aid. When Han was freed, Jiwan treated its injuries. Then, using the translation device, he explained his plan. Together, the 3 of them would have a better chance of survival. "The human is building a coalition," Tall observed with amazement. "He's transforming the tournament into something new." By the 20th day, Jiwan's alliance had grown to include 5 different species. Each brought unique abilities and knowledge. Under Jiwan's leadership, they shared resources and protected each other. The viewers were divided. Some found this cooperation fascinating. Others felt cheated of the bloodshed they had expected. "What will you do?" Kel asked Tall. "This isn't a proper tournament anymore." Tall watched the screens thoughtfully. "No," he agreed. "It's becoming something much more interesting." The 25th day of the tournament dawned with 3 suns rising together in Crucible's purple sky. This rare event cast strange, overlapping shadows across the landscape. Jiwan stood on a high ridge, surrounded by his unlikely allies. Day, the Dravak warrior, scanned the horizon with his keen eyes. Han, the floating tentacled being, hovered slightly above the ground, its sensors detecting vibrations in the earth. Suk, a plant-like creature with glowing spores, provided light in dark places. 2 others, Rin, a small but incredibly fast insect-like being, and Mok, a rock-skinned giant with immense strength, completed their circle. From enemies, they had become a team. And now they had a plan. "The control center is there," Jiwan said, pointing to a distant mountain. His translation device helped all of them understand each other. "According to the maps we found, that's where the Voraks operate this tournament." "Too far," Mok rumbled. "Many dangers between here and there." "Together we can make it," Jiwan assured them. "Each of us has different skills. That's our strength." In the viewing chamber aboard the Voraks ship, Commander Toll and Sub-Commander Kel watched with growing concern. "They've discovered the location of the primary control center," Kel reported. "This has never happened before." "The human has united the surviving competitors," Toll observed. "They're no longer fighting each other." "Is this allowed?" asked another. "Voraks official. The rules state only that the last survivor wins," Toll replied. "There is nothing forbidding cooperation. We never imagined it would be possible across such different species." Jiwan and his allies began their journey toward the mountain. They moved carefully, supporting each other against Crucible's many dangers. When acid rain fell, Mok created a shelter with his rocky body. When they needed to cross a wide ravine, Han extended his tentacles to form a bridge. Day's strength and Rin's speed protected them from predators. Viewers across the Voraks Empire watched in fascination. The betting systems had collapsed. No one knew how to wager on this unprecedented situation. "The tournament is changing," a Voraks philosopher commented. "The human has transformed it from a fight for individual survival into a demonstration of cooperative strength." As they approached the mountain, Jiwan shared his plan. "The control center will have technology we can use to signal the Voraks ships. We can demand that they end the tournament and free us all." "They won't listen," Day growled. "Voraks only understand strength." "Then we'll show them our kind of strength," Jiwan replied. Using the devices they had collected from various ruins, Jiwan created a map of the control center's interior. There would be guards and automated defenses. They would need to work together perfectly to succeed. 3 days later, they reached the base of the mountain. A massive door was built into the rock marked with Vorak symbols. "We need to get inside," Jiwan said. Suk moved forward, pressing her luminous body against the door's security scanner. The spores on her skin rearranged to mimic Vorak's patterns. After several attempts, the door slid open. "Impossible!" Kel shouted in the viewing chamber. "How did they bypass the security?" "The plant being can reconfigure its cellular structure," Toll explained, his voice showing a hint of admiration. "The human must have discovered this ability and found a way to use it." Inside the mountain, Jiwan and his allies moved quickly. Rin scouted ahead, her small size allowing her to slip through narrow spaces unseen. Han disabled security systems with his electrical abilities. Mok and Dai handled the few Voraks guards they encountered, subduing them without killing. "The human insists they not harm the guards," Tall noted with surprise. "Even now he shows restraint." They reached the central chamber, where glowing screens showed views of all of Crucible. Jiwan moved to the main control panel and connected the devices he had gathered. Using the knowledge he had pieced together from the ruins, He began to access the system. Alarms blared throughout the facility. On the Vorax ship, screens flickered and systems began to shut down. "What's happening?" Kel demanded. "The human has infiltrated our network," a technician reported. "He's using our own technology against us." Jiwan's face appeared on the main screen in the viewing chamber. Behind him stood his allies, 6 different species working together. "Commander Tall," Jiwan said calmly, "your tournament is over." "This is unprecedented," Tall replied. "No competitor has ever reached the control center." "We are not competitors anymore," Jiwan explained. "We are allies, and we demand that you end this tournament and return all of us to our home worlds." "Or what?" Kel challenged. "I now control your ship's systems," Jiwan said. "I can shut down life support. I can broadcast the truth about your cruel tournaments to all worlds in range. I can show how different species can work together instead of fighting." The viewing chamber fell silent. The Vorax had never faced such a situation. "You were chosen because you appeared weak," Toll said finally. "How did you accomplish this?" "You misunderstood human strength," Jiwan replied. "True strength isn't about muscles or weapons or natural abilities. It's about adaptation, learning, working together." He gestured to his allies. "Each of us alone could not have survived. Together we've done what none of your previous victims could do. We've changed the rules of your game." Toll considered this for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would change Vorax society forever. "The tournament is ended," he announced. "All competitors will be returned safely to their worlds." Cheers erupted from Jiwan's allies. But he wasn't finished. "And no more tournaments," he insisted. "This ends now." "Our people have conducted these tests for thousands of years," Toll protested. "It is our tradition." "Then start a new tradition," Jiwan suggested. "One of cooperation instead of combat. Imagine what different species could accomplish together, instead of fighting for your entertainment." Months later, Jiwan stood in a forest on Earth, breathing deeply of the familiar air. He had been gone for nearly a year, though on Earth only a few weeks had passed. His wrist device activated, projecting a small hologram. Dai's face appeared, followed by Han, Suk, Rin, and Mok, each on their home worlds. "Alliance meeting," Dai announced. "The Vorax have invited representatives to discuss a new interspecies cooperation council." Jiwan smiled. The Vorax had thought him weak and expected him to die within a day. Instead, he had shown them a different kind of strength, one that changed worlds. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all.